That's really cool.
So there's other nerds out there besides you. That's
Well,
right. You mentioned you're a nerd, right?
oh,
You,
definitely. That's for sure.
so you got this. So our history of being bringing these ideas to the stage and stuff goes back. That's 94. You know, is really what is that? That's like 26, 27
Yeah,
years ago.
yeah,
Yeah, you looked a little bit differently.
a little
So
bit.
did
Thank
I.
you. But I really appreciate that we
Oh,
did this.
okay. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm getting director's notes here.
Are
So
we
Molly
good?
will be out here pulling questions in. So if you guys want questions you want to put in the chat, or if you just even like to just ask your questions on camera, just put it in the text, and Molly will interrupt George and I from going down memory lane and stuff like that. So you've just been hanging out, waiting to do something at Su Teatro again. Is that what's been going on with you?
More or less. I mean, it's great to reconnect. It's great to have anybody look at the piece. This piece really meant a lot to me and made a big difference in putting it together and bringing together all these different histories and narratives. And for many reasons, because it was one of the few times, it's one of the first times I really talked about the racism, not the race, the prejudice and the bias that I grew up in, but juxtaposed against the racism outside our home and the sort of the reality that we all know and encounter of dealing with a society, a dominant culture that is so unaware of its history. And so, and for brown skinned people, Latinos, people like ourselves, not knowing that it was a case in California with Mexicans that really turned the tide around segregation and that predated Brown versus Board of Ed. And it's not about better, it's not about that, but it's just important to acknowledge the history. That's all, and that really just spurred a lot. So this piece that we're talking about next year that I want to be doing talks about a different history, about settler colonialism and about the history of this country, its republic, and its treatment of indigenous cultures and indigenous nations. So we're just going to continue what we began with this one. So I'm looking forward to the next piece.
So I'm a prof in the Chicano Studies department at Metro, and this is like I mean, this is great history. They're showing, the whole Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. One of the things pieces that my students are shocked. They think that one day the United States went out and decided to buy buy the Southwest, and I said, yeah, you're driving your car. I come up behind you and I put a gun at your head and I buy your car for $4.50. I bought your car. Doesn't that work the same way? And then going backward through the process. But I think aside from that, it just really, this is 4 years old, this piece, right?
No, actually, no. I premiered it 2 years ago. Actually, 2 years ago.
I heard 2017, so I was.
No, it's okay. No, there's incidents that happened in 2017. Unfortunately, listen, this thing's happened in Zoom time. We missed a little bit because of the thing that we missed was this little incident that happened on the FDR where a guy, while I was in my car, told me to go back to my country. So we missed that. And then there was a lot of little anecdote about being called the N-word in my neighborhood when the people were so confused. They thought me as a brown that I must be an N person, So, but you got the thrust of it, and it was really great. So yeah.
Well, I saw those on the Vimeo.
Yeah.
And I don't know why or how that got cut out, which is unfortunate.
That's all right.
That was a big conversation here about even using the N-word anymore, right? And we had some conversations, and we decided. I mean, it's got to be part of our conversation as we go forward. We got to mature past that. But I guess I lost my train of thought here. I wanted to connect. Oh, yeah, so I was gonna say that the relevancy is just so powerful today, in the sense of now we're having a conversation about critical race theory.
Yeah.
Right. And this is right out of that conversation. I've been dying. I want to have a conversation with one of these people who are so offended about critical race theory, because that, even just talking about it is talking about it. Why do you not think this was about racism?
Right.
Why do you not think that this was a core structure of our country?
Right.
and just explain. I'm fine. Tell me about it, because I can't even understand how you unravel that out, but I'm willing to hear it.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm listening to you, and just to piggyback a little bit, my decision to tell that story and include the N-word the way I did was a big decision, and we talked about when I performed in New York. It was actually it was interesting. I thought there would be more pushback, and people understood it for what it was, in the sense that that's something that happened to me, and somebody called me that, a young white girl, and that it didn't take it the way that it might have gone. And I felt very good about people respecting the story and understanding the context. But I understood, believe me, when I was going to perform it, I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a little bit of a risk.
Well, as artists, we need to take that risk, and we need to put it in there, because if we eliminate it, then we no longer have that conversation.
Exactly.
About what that meant and what that felt like.
Yeah.
I have a parallel for you. When I was a kid, I was walking down the street here in Denver was segregated, so it's South Denver, and somebody pulled up behind me. A truckload of white guys in a pickup truck. I'm not lying. They were living up to their stereotype, and they yelled out to me, "Hey, Beaner," and "Hey, Mexican," right? They said Beaner, and I got confused because I didn't think that's a bad word, because I really like beans, right? And then they told me to go back to where you came from, and then they said go back to Mexico, which also confused me because I had never been to Mexico. I'm the first person in my family, and I'm talking about my mother and my father and my grandparents, to ever have gone to Mexico. And so it was just a shock when you interact with that other world, and their ignorance and their closed offness has put you in a position of, you just don't understand what what that mentality is. I think you illustrate that well.
Well, and that's also, it's indicative of the experience of so many people in this country, that it has a history. And I see where, I think it's Ted.
Ted's an ongoing listener of this. Go ahead.
Oh, but he brought up the case of Dred Scott, Dred Scott versus Sanford. I think it's 1850. And that ruling, the Supreme Court judge there who ruled on that, his last name is Taney, Tanney. And that ruling, where they said that the enslaved person, that because they're 3/5 person, they don't have a right to be in court. So that case was thrown out, and he was simply looking for citizenship and acceptance as a full citizen, because he had escaped the South and came north. But interestingly enough, the reason it's important for us to know that history is because that's where the legislature came in, and the 13th Amendment was the response to a Supreme Court decision that tried to say these people are not equal or whatever. So what we get sometimes, people don't understand, sometimes we get statutes, we get laws as a way to balance out bad decisions on the Supreme Court or in the judicial branch. So I love Ted's question to remind us, that case, the Dred Scott case was a big case. That case got corrected. When we go to Indian law, which is what I'm doing now, the next piece I'm doing is called In the Court of the Conqueror, and it's about federal Indian law and the diminishment of tribal sovereignty in this country. And in that case, we have court cases that are held up from the early 1800s that have not been equalized by a legislative act. So fortunately with Dred Scott, as bad a decision that was, it was taken away by an amendment, the 13th Amendment. But that doesn't happen all the time. And so the way this country works is mind-boggling, but at least we do have these apparatuses that we can use with education, with knowledge, with strategy, so on and so forth.
You said something really interesting, many things interesting, but in the Platica, where they asked you if you had faith in this country, and now we're talking about 2 years later, and you said no. You could go give them the second part, because they didn't hear it.
Well, I did ask, somebody did ask, do you have faith in the country? I mean, I don't have faith in elected leadership. I don't. And I think what I have faith in is I have faith in people like us. I have faith in how social resistance and social movements have always altered and changed the course of this nation. I have faith in that. I also think that we're up against a lot, and it's going to take a lot of strategizing, a lot of collective work to really, because we're up against a big machine now. It's not just people who don't think like me. There's corporations and there's big money that will kind of firm up all the walls that keep us from finding more equity and justice in terms of race justice, gender justice, environmental justice. So the work is there for us to engage in. There's no doubt about that. And I don't have faith in our election because of the partisanship that we're in. Right now, the political landscape in this country is scary, to see the kinds of things that you have a president who lost an election who's actually being able to get money and support by basically telling a lie. It's unbelievable. So that picture's not good, but I do feel with the social justice work I'm doing here in New York City and with people that I know, I have seen young people really step up. I mean, if anything, Black Lives Matter last year really rocked this country, and the young people, and not just young people, but predominantly young people, really forged, gave us a concrete possibility of how we could see change. And so I said that before Black Lives Matter really sort of blew up in 2019. And so I would change that now.
Well, I think there's also a lot of us struggling over our perspective in it, and we also don't say this guy's name a lot. We usually say that guy who thought he lost the election but really thought he won the election but really lost it, and we never mention his name. But
I call him the occupier.
Yeah. But there is a real. I mean, if you read everything that's going on, there's a lot of post analysis. That's the period we're in.
Yeah.
And trying to get ahead of it to predict what's happening next, and we don't. But I think there's that what you're talking about here is a narrative that is continuing to be repeated and starting to emerge clearer and clearer, that this struggle is about race.
Yeah.
And it's about, as Ted says, the original sin in this country. So as they don't want to talk about critical race theory, they are really re-emphasizing so many of those things. And I'm saying the whites who are feeling that that things are being taken away from them, feeling so that they need to protect whatever territories, that block that really supports that guy, right? I wanted to offer this and see if you're familiar with this. I'm sure you are. Is the work of Dunning, the Dunning School of Education.
Oh yeah.
He's the guy who came out of, was it Columbia? And
I know about it, but I'm not sure where he came out.
He was a post-Reconstructionist guy.
Yeah.
So he was he was responsible, a lot of his work for the Birth of a Nation kicked off a lot of stuff, but he went back in and started to incorporate into the schools all these pieces that interview you do, that the interrogation piece in the courtroom that you do, that so many of his theories were incorporated. His school of education it wasn't until the 1960s when they disassembled it. Up until then, all the great scholars and stuff were going through his whole program and teaching. That was where they came from. That was the theoretical basis for everything they were doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's exciting right now what's happening. I don't remember the journalist's name. She got a position at Duke. The woman African American woman who came up with the 1619 project to talk about the importation of slaves and enslavement culture and history. And it's an incredible history. She's pretty amazing. On the flip side of that, because I've been this master's of legal studies and indigenous peoples law, I mean, Native Americans working in law, scholarship, and history are just rocking it with many books, articles, essays around providing people not only with education, but with a whole different perspective and outlook on the real nature of what happened when this country was formed, and incredible things that this country did to assure and affirm and make it possible that invading Europeans, white Europeans, could own the land of indigenous people. It's stuff you think people could just make up, but it's unbelievable how intentional it was, how assimilation of indigenous cultures has been in process for hundreds of years. And it's something that immigrant groups have had to suffer through as well. But the way it was directed to indigenous cultures is really mind-boggling, and it's just enraging when you read about it. But I think you're talking about education that's happening, real kind. When you talk about critical race theory, critical indigenous theory, I mean, it's really starting to have, I think it's starting to really shake foundations that we thought maybe would not happen.
So Molly says that it's Nicole Hannah Jones.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, she's great. She's got a position at Duke, and there's a controversy there because they didn't give her tenure, and there's some uproar around that. But she's going to be there for 5 years, and it's really she's amazing. She's really, if you anybody gets it, it's a great podcast, 1619 Project. If anybody hasn't heard it, you should check it out. It's really, really, it's powerful. It's well done. It's informative, but it also gives you a real perspective on history that we don't get. You know.
So, are you an artist or an activist first?
Man, you know, I'm an artivist. You know, I mean, to me, you know, what I love most in life is making these pieces and writing. Writing to me is my thing, and I love to write and I love to read. But to me, the art making is the thing that I love the most. But there's no doubt that a lot of the things I'm involved with involve social justice and activist work in other ways. But when I'm performing or making my pieces, you know, that's where I hope I can let the artist in me sort of just have a little space and take over for a little while, you know?
Okay, so how come no shoes?
You know, so the map, the rug was the map of Mexico right before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And I don't know, it was really weird. It was like, I just wanted to, the rug felt nice. And something inside me, you know, there was a thing that happened to me when I was really young and 5 years old, and I had to wear shorts to kindergarten. I refused, and my mother spanked me, and then she walked, and everybody saw my brown legs, and I was really embarrassed because now people knew I was brown, not just in my face and hands, but also my legs. And so some reason I'm like, I want my feet. I want my brown feet here. I got my brown hands. It seems really kind of trivial, but I don't know what it was. I've never done that before. I never performed barefoot. That was the first time. And it really happened. It wasn't even planned, Tony, to be honest. The first show I went out, I wore shoes and I just took them off right before I came on, and I just kept that. And it felt right, you know?
So you do stuff sometimes and then it's afterwards you figure out why you did it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, most of the time.
Most of the time. That's the artist impulse.
Yeah. And that was interesting. You even picked up on that because it was not planned, and you know, nobody really asked me that question. Nobody thinks about it. So everybody just thought it was okay. But I'll tell you, something happened the first night I did it. I said, I'm taking my shoes off, and it was just felt right, and I just kept that, you know.
Well, it's a statement, especially from the angle we were looking at with the camera.
Oh, that's true. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a mise en scène, right? Everything on stage is, we should think that that's intentional from the artist, right?
Yeah, totally.
And just learning about you as the artist, and I did enjoy your dancing. I think it's a wonderful engagement. You talked about in the Platica, and I wanted to bring this up too, was the videos, the slides, and that you didn't want a slide, you didn't want a PowerPoint, you didn't want a slide presentation. And maybe you could share a little bit about the process. And I'm being told we have about 10 minutes. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, that's fine, man. You mean for my piece?
Yeah. I jumped back into talking about your piece. You talked about the slides and how the slides were evolved with
in the piece.
The guy you worked with.
So that was, honestly, there's probably too much of it. I wanted probably less of that. But I definitely wanted, there were some images I really wanted. Some of them were about where I live, what it was like when I moved there. I thought that was important. What I really wanted and you see it, but it was hard to get. It was very hard to find, and we finally found something. But I wanted an aerial photograph of El Barrio. And what you see, you don't know that, but there was one shot where you see an aerial shot of this one area, and that is really the aerial shot of El Barrio. But I wanted it from 1960, and it took me months, and I could never find it. but I wanted to show the dirt road of El Barrio, and that was really important. So there were certain images I really wanted. And then I had some family photographs from Knott's Berry Farm that you see in there that I really, really wanted in there for myself. That was really for me. But to see, you know, this juxtaposition of an immigrant family in the U.S. and not knowing what the hell was going on, like not cluing in whatsoever, you know. But it's interesting you asked that question. I had, this piece began as a lecture that had nothing to do with me. I just talked about the Mendez case. And the Mendez case was something that I got turned on to late through an accident of this guy making the video. But then once I read up on it, it was pretty amazing. And then I went to Chapman College. I was visiting my mom and my dad, and I went to Chapman College and went through their archives. So the Mendez family archives are in Chapman College in Orange County. And so I was able to get to the archive and see a lot of material that I couldn't find elsewhere. And that's where I got, that led me to getting the actual transcript of the case. So for me, these things became, you know, like I never realized that a court case could be such a great thing to put into a performance. I never did it. It was my first time. And I'm using some of that in my next piece, like going to historical records and using them as springboards for, you know, autobiographical material to see how they intersect. And this piece ended up doing that. It wasn't like that in the beginning. When I first did it, I had a PowerPoint. It was about Mendez. It was very matter of fact for a bunch of college students. And it worked because nobody ever heard of Mendez versus Westminster. Nobody knew the history. But when making the piece, what made it better for me was to see how that history informed my experience, even though no one knew about that history where I grew up. And it was 5 miles from where it happened. So it's amazing how this stuff comes full circle, you know?
Well, I think that I don't know if you've talked to your audience as much, what their responses have been, but the personal piece is really the piece that draws you in and makes it resonate. It is, you get very, even in the conversation afterwards when you're talking about your mother, and I do want to return to that just real quickly, but I sent you that constant contact today. And at first was working on it back and forth with Angelina, who's our marketing person. And she had put that you analyze the Constitution and stuff. And I was like, well, yeah, but he also dramatizes it as well. Right. And so we did. But then it was after I saw that, it was like, you got to do it in threes, right? So it's analyze, dramatize, and personalize. And to me, that was what came from having seen it, is like, and you do all three. So you could use that tagline if you wanted to go forward, because that's exactly what you do. But I think that takes us from, this is in this book, but those decisions affect human beings. I am one of those human beings who was affected by this.
Yeah.
And then lastly, you wrapped up talking about your mother, and I thought that was very poignant and very powerful.
Yeah, that was a biggie. You know, that's a biggie. That whole little thing at the end where I talk about the birth and my mom being white, and I mean, it's deep, you know, and it's going to continue in the next piece. You know what I mean? Once I did that in this piece in 14, you know, there's too many other references and that to be honest with you, resonate more now as an adult, or as, you know, being much older than when I was a kid. The things happened, I just was confused and I didn't understand. And now it hits you. It's like, wow, that was really, really messed up, you know, and it really affects, you know, how I feel about myself, how I, you know, my own self-esteem, my own sense of trust, you know, like it really messed me up. And luckily it didn't stop me, and it now becomes material that I can really apply and use in a way that opens up other doors. You know what I mean?
I always felt that that the stuff I encountered growing up when I became a teenager and an activist, I found on stage that I could get all the aggression that I wanted out on there. You know, it was great of channeling this against racism, against all that you know, the supremacy and the oppression that I was facing, and I found that mocking that power structure and it's the sarcasm that got me in so much trouble when I was a teenager was actually I always crack up. People pay money for this shit, you know, to come and see. And for me, it was a release. I was able to put all that out there, you know, that people, and there's a responsibility that goes with it. Has your mother seen the show yet or heard about it or no?
I know my mom, no, she hasn't seen it. I was supposed to, she was going to see it because before the pandemic hit, I was going to be in Santa Monica at Highways Performance, and we had these dates, and then boom, it didn't happen. So I don't know what's going to happen because now I'm really in making this new piece, and that's going to open in March, and I haven't even tried to figure out how I can do that piece again there. But I would love to, but she hasn't seen it, no. And yeah, I do know about that case. The woman, somebody's writing about Perez versus Sharp in 1948. I do know about that case, and I couldn't write about there's a bunch of cases. Actually, there's two cases before Mendez that were not class action suits that dealt with education, and they only solved the situation for a school district. What was significant about the Mendez case was that it was a class action lawsuit that eventually changed the laws for the whole state. And that's why I really focus on that one. But it's not the only case. And I'm glad somebody else passed that along in the chat. I do know about that case that was 3-4 years after Mendez. Yeah.
Well, your piece even becomes more relevant as we talk about the present Supreme Court. People are waiting.
Oh my God. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
So it's a tribute to your work that it's going to be relevant for some time, for sometimes good, sometimes bad. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, for me, so I'm doing this thing, it's kind of crazy. It's called Performing the Constitution, because for me, it became really clear, like I want to make performance pieces, at least 3, that really demonstrate how something like that, you think you don't understand it, you never read it, man, it's the law of the land. It's the foundation for everything we do, that everything that might be good and everything that's horrific, it's not an accident. And so for me, this became a way to use this as a way to hopefully get people to think a little bit more, but see, oh yeah, a lot of what happens in my everyday life is tied to that document. And that's why I think it's got to be rewritten. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want, but I think it's important. And that's why I decided to continue with this phase of just working on using historical documents, historical realities that we may or may not know a lot about, and see how that affects our imagination, our emotions, our feelings, all that.
Well, thank you, George. We're getting the wrap up. I hope everything's good. You're getting ready to go back to school, teaching in person in the fall?
Well, I'm in New York City. I teach at the College of Staten Island, and the K through 12 schools are going to be in person full. But in the college level, there's a lot. I'm part of a union. I'm really involved with the union, and we're health and safety is the number one priority. So we don't want anyone to be in a risky situation. We all want to be back in the classroom. Everybody wants to be back, but we just don't know if the air vent systems in the buildings, they're all old buildings. And so it's like, we don't want anybody. We don't want students. We don't want staff or faculty we don't want one person to get sick. So we're not sure yet. We're not sure, but hopefully yes, but it's a daily struggle.
Well, George, thank you very, very much. I have some good things to talk to you about, and possible, and the next production that you're talking to, the next work you're talking about, fits into a lot of things that we're getting ready to do here at the Teatro, around the Teatro. We're doing more collaborations with the First People communities and Native communities around here. And next year, we've been there's some things I can't announce yet about this stuff, but the focus will be